Let's move on to the summary of the book. I'm just gonna read from the back because it's a book about four people though. So Alice is a novelist who meets Felix, who works in a warehouse, and asks him if he'd like to travel to Rome with her. In Dublin, her best friend Eileen is getting over a breakup and slips back into flirting with Simon, a man she has known since childhood. So, yeah, what did you enjoy about the book, friends?
I mean, it's like no plot, just vibes, man. But also, I think like it's such a we live in a society book. Both in like what the things that the characters discuss, both Alice and Felix, and also Simon and Eileen, but also those long email exchanges between Alice and Eileen, like, but also it's like I think, I mean, I say we live in a society as almost a joke, but it's like you don't really, the fact that you have a 300-page book of characters just sort of navigating their late 20s and early 30s. But it's funny. It's really funny.
Yeah, yes.
And it's humor that maybe I wouldn't have picked up 3 years ago because I was obviously much younger than I am now, and so I don't have the life experience and the context to really understand or to grasp or to have like to just get what she's talking about. But I also it's true for Rooney as well, like it's almost like growing up is a thing that people go through.
Yeah.
But like she wouldn't have written this book in 2018 or 2017, with I think there's like a balance of like cynicism but also hopefulness, which is I really enjoyed that. And not to be like a piece of art is a reflection of like the artist itself, but I think Rooney's grappling with some of the ideas that she speaks about in the book, not necessarily the like, well, capitalism is bad, or like this is the society we live in, but she's grappling with I mean, we're going to talk about this hopefully later, but she's grappling with the idea of her fame. She's grappling with what it means to be in your late 20s, early 30s with relationships and stuff like this. And who knows, she might look back on some of like how she's infused herself in the book and be like, I don't feel that way anymore. But it's really cool and fun and like worthwhile to read, like someone grappling with those thoughts in real time. So, and also like the book ends like while we're still in the pandemic. So yeah, it's in that way, it's also an account of like their time. Like it deals with contemporary ideas, but also deals with things that people have been thinking about since before we were born. It's a really cool balance of that. So that's just some of what I enjoyed about the book. So yeah.
You are like when you spoke about how funny it is, because I was rereading some things before this call, and I think, okay, first I want to ask, what were your favorite I laughed out loud moments? One of mine, because I was rereading, was when Eileen, who is one of the characters in the book, starts dating this other man called Aiden, and Sally Rooney says they went for another drink I'm reading from it, like literally, and then another. Aiden's apartment had a lot of tangled black cables all over the floor, and his bed was just a mattress. That really made me laugh. Because
it's just like
you can visualize the kind of person they are as well.
Yeah. I think she's also Rooney's great at that, because I remember like a part in Normal People where she's describing how like Marianne and Connell are hanging out, and she's like he's making her breakfast while she's looking at jokes on Twitter or something, and that's so I could see that she's great at that.
What stood out for for you in this book that you didn't necessarily stand out for you in the other books?
What stood out for me? I mean, there are like grown-ups, dude. They're like adults, and I think like even though they fall into the characters in the book, I mean, even though they fall into moments of kind of like self-pity and like just, you know, feeling bad for themselves, it's just like there isn't as much angst in the characters as there as like conversations or normal people, because it's just, I think maybe when you settle into your 20s, you just kind of um even though it's like with Eileen and Simon in particular, I think they're both kind of self-aware, and they are, you know, they have moments of like extreme self-loathing, but like Eileen in particular, but like I don't know, man. I think that youthful angst or reaching for something or wanting, you know, feeling like if I'm able to do this, then my life will will magically be perfect. And I think Eileen is definitely dealing with that. But I don't know. There's also like a kind of acceptance, and this comes later on in the book. But I also think throughout the book as well, like even in the exchanges that Eileen and Alice have, it's kind of like, oh, this is happening at the moment. Yeah, what can you do? You know, and I don't know, I really enjoyed that. And I think maybe because it speaks to me. And things that like I'm going through, I'm like, well, this is, you know, but yeah, life was going. And I think overall that's the sort of takeaway from the book. It's just like um you make mistakes, you know, it's just like, but in those moments, I think, you know, life is still worth uh living.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't know how to, it's like I'm trying not to speak in like cliches, but it's true though, it's true though.
And then craft wise, because
Mm.
sometimes I know that sometimes I just ask questions about the subject or the character itself, and like craft wise, did it live up to your expectations? Do you enjoy the way that it was written, the style, etc.?
What do you think of like the email format? Because I've in like a few reviews and stuff, people have been like you know, they maybe take an issue with the email format and how deep the characters get into sort of um what does she, hold up, because
It's
I'm looking at the acknowledgements, and she says, you know, like the way that the characters get into like the Bronze Age collapse and stuff. And I don't know, I've kind of picked up some umbrage against that, like in some of the reviews. And I don't know, girl, I enjoyed it. It was a bit like, what is the point? But I liked it. It felt, anyway, what do you think of it?
I wrote, I don't know any 25-year-olds who write like this. But then today, as I was thinking about it, I was like, for example, you and I get into it when we're discussing things. So I get why the function of those emails when you're talking to a friend. I mean, at times it did feel a bit like weird because who knows that much about the Bronze Age and who knows about this particular subject as much. But then I also understood it to be just like an exchange between friends about their interests and like what is like occupying their minds lately. And yeah, I didn't necessarily think that it needed to feature as much because I don't know, some parts of like didn't work for me, and then others at times I was like, okay, I understand the function of it, but sometimes I was like, okay, I know that you guys are trying to update yourselves about like what's happening in your life, and it would have been nice if some of the emails were just like, oh, this is what I'm dealing with, Alice or Eileen, and it's just, it feels like my life is going like this, or updating me about my life, because that it's pretty normal between people. Like, hey friend, I'm catching you up on my life. Here are the things that are happening, instead of writing paragraphs and paragraphs about Euro-American literature. But like, I mean, I loved it in the sense that you were learning something new as well. I also loved it because, for example, when I mentioned the Euro-American literature scene, it's those moments where Rooney is making really principled takes, which I really, really enjoyed in the book. So just using Alice as an author, I thought it was just like really, really nice. So yeah, I like them in some parts. That's how I'm going.
In some parts, no?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are parts of it that felt a bit like, girl, I know you're just filling pages, right?
Yes.
I know you're just like, my queen is just writing. You know, I felt like that. I'm not gonna lie, I felt like that at some parts. But that last part of the book when they're all at Alice's place.
Yeah, yes.
And shit hit the fan. I think there was context for that because I was like, yeah, this is what you do when a friendship is awkward, when things aren't quite as, it's because it's just like you want to stay connected to someone, but you don't know what to say. And I think that, I don't know, I can only speak for myself. I think when you connect with someone in sort of those like, in like university or like when like in intellectual circles or and when sort of like the thing that you guys connect about is like books and literature and stuff, and that's kind of like a third line in your friendship, and that's obviously a third line in the book. Like I just think, like okay, so in the final section of the book, it's kind of revealed that like, there's some stuff that happened there. There's some unresolved conflict. So that's why things haven't been as good with them as they were before Alice, was admitted to hospital and stuff like that. And I think what those long email exchanges and them talking about like the Bronze Age and all this stuff, it's just like sharing information with a friend, like, oh, I thought this was interesting, but it's also it's a way for, like, I don't think it's useless, it's just kind of like, it's what happens sometimes when it's like you want to stay connected with someone but you don't know what to say. So you're like, hey, did you when you send someone a link, like, hey, did you see this? But things aren't good between y'all, but it's like you wanna stay connected to them. So I think it acts in that way. However, I also understand people who feel like, let's just get to the real stuff. Let's get to the real stuff. But I think it's just that thing of just like, you have to stay with something, and you have to also respect the, not, I mean, I don't know if respect is the right word, but you have to trust the fact that like an artist, there's intention behind something. And so I do think there's intention behind those. But also like, I don't know whether this was in the conversation that Rooney had with I don't know what her name is, but she's a writer, and they had this conversation. We spoke about this. Like, I sent you the link to this. Like, I don't know if she said this in that conversation or whether this was in a review of the book, but it's just this idea of like two female characters having these kind of philosophical conversations about previous civilizations, about current society, like all these things. It's that has its utility, and I think it's something that we haven't, I mean, not to get into representation matters rhetoric, but it's just like when you don't see a lot of something, I mean, it's when you don't see a lot of something, it does throw some people, but it's like, oh, I've never seen this before. And so maybe this is why my reaction to it is like, what's going on? Like, how does this add to the plot? But it's like, well, I mean, it does, like in the end it does. For me, to me anyway.
You're all right. I definitely agree with you, because towards the end I was like, okay, that was worth it, because the email epistolaries, because it is that, was like, okay, I understand the function of letters like that, whereas here it's a combination of so many things, and you are right about them engaging philosophical questions and whatever, but it really served its function towards the end. I was like, okay, I get that whole bit, because when you have to confront someone, you can't run away from a confrontation anymore when you're physically in the same space. And they scare you are a genius, but in my opinion, I don't think you are able to avoid that anymore. And seeing that happen between Alice and Eileen, it felt like the stakes were just high, and it hit quite, like, for me, it hit, and I was like, I really, really love this, and I love confrontation in a book, not when I have to do it.
Listen, I was gagging. I was like, oh, bitch. And I had to put the book down and just like take a breather because, like, and I also love it because it's not like the confrontation, it's not like simplistic. It's not like you're right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because they both make valid points. They both do. And I guess the person that you, and it's not even about like I'm taking this person's side, but the person that you relate to the most, for me anyways, like it's about like how you are, like the type of person you are, which is why I think like anyway, we'll get into it.
Okay. Well, what did you think about the characters? Do you like them? Or what did you find interesting about them? Did you like them in the book? Just a subjective question.
Do you know what I thought was interesting? The way the male characters are like, especially Simon, because I don't know, I was like, I know this guy. But it didn't feel flat. You know, it felt like even though he's and I believe Eileen when she says that, like, she doesn't feel like she can do anything for him because he's so put together and he's so, and I think that it is true that like he's put together and he's like stable, but he also, there's a lot there that you that will kind of like remain unknowable to people outside, but like he's trying, you know. And I don't know, like I really liked him. I liked how dependable he is. I don't know, like not to create fanfics about like a fictional character, but I like Simon. I mean, I'm thinking about Alice and Eileen and Felix. I actually like Felix too. I don't know, like he's like, you know, at the beginning,
I hated him at the beginning, and then towards the end, I was like, I love this person. I love this character.
Yeah, but I also think he like it's not like he's unaware of what he's doing when he's totally being a jerk to Alice, but he actively chooses to not be a jerk to her anymore. Like, you know, because in the like he's choosing to be. It's not like he's just like, oh, this is just the way that I am. Like, he's making an active choice to be that way, and he decides to change. You know what I mean? And I like, yeah, I think that's realistic, and I actually really like that Rooney did that, like in the writing. You know, she wasn't just like, this is just the way that he is, and he felt. I think it was an interesting thing with him because it was like the character had to change because he had to sort of like step up in the relationship, and in order to do that, had to treat his partner well, but he wasn't like pushed or coerced into that. Like he chose to do that, you know. And I like, and he can do that, you know. He's not like incapable of change or whatever. I read a review in which it was like people, like the writer was like, it's interesting how Rooney kind of takes this position of like Alice deserves a partner that treats her that way because she's rich. And I was like, I hear you, but it just kind of feels like a little bit simplistic. And at the time, I hadn't read the book, and now that I've read it, I'm like, yeah, that feels like a really reductive conclusion to come to. I don't know. So anyway, I like Felix and the two Alice and Eileen. What do you think of Alice and Eileen?
At the beginning, I really found Eileen sympathetic. in all her misery, as much as it is self-imposed at times, and she doesn't ask for what she wants, she implies at it or implies at the wrongdoings of others. I found it very. I like characters to feel human. So even when you were mentioning Felix, like, or even Simon in this case, that this is a very dependable person, but like some of the actions are to, as a very moralistic person, me, I was like, but like at the end of the of the book, I was like, you know what? This is very human. This is very real, and I really like this about most of these characters, that they feel real. When Felix was acting like a jerk, and he changed. That's how humans are. So I really enjoyed that. And Alice, I found her to be really, really funny. I did find her to be a bit flat at some times because I didn't really know what was happening with. I don't know. I felt like, okay, we are given that she is an author and she went through this in her life, or she's going through all these things in her life, and she has this partner who's a jerk to her and becomes lovelier to her towards the end of the book. But I didn't really find that there was much flesh to be there with. Like, I could sympathize with her, but like not as much as Eileen and her. I felt like Eileen had a much bigger life as well. Maybe the reasons for that with Alice is that she was removed from normal life as well. So yeah, but I did find that too the thing. I found Alice to be a bit flat, but I really like how complex and human and full of flesh and life the characters were. What do you think about Alice and Eileen?
Yeah, you're saying that now. Like I think out of the four characters, I think Alice is the one that I feel was the most like, because with all of them and I think maybe it's just I don't know what it is, but they all have edges, and if Alice has edges too, but even like her edges, they aren't that sharp, man. Like so yeah, I think out of all the characters, she feels the most flat to me. She's real, but not as she didn't feel as fully fleshed out as the other characters. And I think Irene was kind of like Irene. Excuse me, Eileen. I said Irene. Eileen. She got on my nerves. I'm sorry, she did. She really did, and that has to do with sort of like the fact that she, like the reasons you stated, she isn't direct with what she wants. She's miserable, but some of the misery is self-imposed. So that really got on my nerves. But it's like it got on my nerves for that reason, but it got on my nerves just like for my own personal reasons and and how I feel like I really don't like it when people exhibit those traits. You know, that's also something that I'm working on, because it's good to realize that like when people are that way, it has nothing to do with you. It's just stuff that they're working through, you know what I mean? And I think Irene, I keep saying Irene. Eileen is aware of that, you know, but she kind of, I think, you know, like one of the later like towards the end of the book, she speaks about how she wrote this essay, and then she like someone reached out to her and it's like, are you working on a book about this? And she never responded. And I thought that was like so heartbreaking. Like for real, because you can tell it's like something that she feels like she had so much potential, but she didn't live up to it, or she feels like there's so much more that she wants, but for whatever reason, you know, for like a myriad of reasons, she didn't like advocate for herself. And yeah, I actually, it's so weird. I thought the difference in like their careers would be a little bit more explored, like the difference between Alice and Eileen, and the fact that, like, you know, they went to university together, and Alice is like this huge literary figure, and Eileen is making 2,000 euros a month at this obscure literary magazine, and like what that does to a friendship, you know, like the class disparities, and like, you know, I thought they would, I thought that would be a bit more explored. Like, do you know, okay, and towards the end of the book, when they have sort of like that huge conflict and then they make up again, I was like, I understand why it's written this way, but I also would have liked a little bit more.
Yeah.
But I get it, but I would have liked a little bit more there. So yeah.
Speaking to that, I think you know, sometimes you just want a specific thing out of a book and then that doesn't happen, and that's fine because the author probably wasn't going to write about that.
To do that, yeah.
But like it would have been, for me, this often happens where some things just don't make sense. So, for example, like Eileen lives at this flat with this couple who, and she hates her flatmates, but like I never really understand the reasons behind that. So it's like those things that miss context. She's miserable because she's not making a lot of where she works, and then but like we don't really understand how that's happening. It's not shown. I'm like, okay, is the author just choosing not to show that? But I don't enjoy the risk of not going there. And then another thing for me was Felix, who's a warehouse worker and who was able to leave and go to Rome. I'm like, how does that happen? And he still gets back and he has a job. Like, was leave that quick? Or perhaps it is in like Europe for all I know. But like some things with the working class characters, again, I don't know why I put quotation marks because they are working class characters.
Because they literally are working class, yeah.
Just I had questions like, how does that work? Or it would be nice if we went there, but I'm like, okay, the author didn't. This is what the book is. Perhaps accept it as it is. So yeah.
And I also think like when you're, I mean, this is true for normal people and also conversations with friends. It's like, even if you're working class, when you have proximity to people who aren't, the idea that you could just like go to Paris for the weekend with your friend, it's like, yeah, that happens. And I think part of the, like, I think of like a character like Francis and also Eileen, actually. I think there's a little bit of like a resentment there, because it's like I literally have access to these things, but how come, like I look at my life and I compare myself to my peers, and it's just like I'm just not living up to the promise, or you know.
And how does it feel if it's like that close to, like, the promise is that close? If your friends are able to do it,
but it's unattainable, yeah.
Why is it like, so it would have been really nice if maybe I like conflict too much, but it would have been interesting, I think, if there was
it would have been interesting,
some conflict between Alice and Eileen.
It's not that book, but it would have been interesting. Maybe we'll see.
And we'll never know.
And we'll never know. Like maybe. I mean, I don't know how much Rooney engages with sort of like critical conversations about her work, but
I wouldn't.
If she does, yeah, I would. I think maybe like with the first book, you know, just to see what people, and then like with normal people, and then it gets. But like with this, I think she's a little bit tapped out. But good for her.